to you all, and welcome to the second part, finally, regarding the server build, the Dell case which I had completely stripped out, carved massive gaping holes into, just so I can fit some more discs in the front of it. The challenge is, the case has been getting rather dusty inside, so we need to try and find a nice, easy solution for some cleaning dust filters, I suppose, but actually what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating our own dust filters that will fit inside this grill. But now I have to fit some fan filters in there, and what I'm thinking is magnetic fan filters. So what I've done is I've bought some magnetic tape, which I'm going to cut to size and then fit onto this mesh that I bought cheaply online. I'm sure it's going to go swimmingly, but join me and we'll see how we get on. So here is the problem. This grate that came as part of the 3 cages inside, so we got 1, 2, 3, and in fact these are 3 separate grates that I've just literally bolted together with a screw and a nut. And what I intend to do with this is, well, I want to fit it on the front and it will be attached magnetically using the same sort of magnetic tape that I'm going to be using for the mesh on the front. So once again, this is going to be this mesh that I purchased very, very cheaply, mind you, and we're going to lay it out, cut it into sizes that fits the inside of each of these grills. So it'll be 3 separate fan filters. But the first thing we have to tackle is this grate doesn't actually fit within the housing. So hoping you can see that, because I can't through the camera. This little tab section here, I've got to take that off on each of the sections. You know what this calls for? Dremel. Okay, this is how dedicated I was to the cause today. I have finished cutting off the tabs on the grill, and we're going to see now if it fits. I'm doing this live just for the, you know, the sheer fact of reaction, but here we go. Alright. Tricky to do with only one hand, but hey ho. Alright. Please fit. Ugh, okay. Oh. Oh. Beautiful. Okay, that fits basically exactly how I wanted it to. So now all we've got to do is file down these rough edges here, get all that smoothed out, and then we need to make the filters. So the next part is I need to somehow get this to magnetically snap onto the front of the case so that it just sits there hands-free. And what I'm thinking is we put a bit of magnetic tape on either side of the grate. And in fact that will serve as 2 purposes. Obviously it will mount the grate to the case nice and solid, here's me hoping, but also it should fill in these gaps on the sides, because these 3 grates, aren't exactly the full width of the case. So here's me hoping the magnetic strips are going to do 2 jobs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this magnetic strip and I'm going to make it just a little bit shorter than the full height of the grate, because I need to account for some little lips here on the inside of the case. So if I make it just a little bit shorter, it should clear that, and then it will snap onto the inside of the case. And I have tested it. Once it's like there, it's pretty strong. It's pretty strong. So it should cope just fine with this grate, because this thing is actually very, very light, which is a good thing. So let me get the cutting board and do what we need to do. Actually, for this part, what I've decided is I'm just going to measure it and cut it with a pair of scissors. Nice and simple. Okay, I've tested the 2 pieces to make sure that they do in fact fit on the inside edge without actually colliding with anything, and they do, so that's good. So what I'm going to do is now just stick these to the side and see how well it magnetizers. Here's me hoping. We've got magnets either side, one there, one there. I think she fits. Ooh, is it? Is it? There's a little bit of jiggle in there, but tell you what, I can do something about that. But for all, if you know what, for all intents and purposes, that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Yeah, very happy with that. I do think that the tape is not quite wide enough to fill in those gaps, so you know what, I may have to double it up. As much as I really don't want to do that, but that's what you gotta do. That's what you gotta do. And there is a bit of play up and down, but honestly, that's not the end of the world. We could put in some little bits of foam on these sections here that I took out. So I must have taken off just a little bit too much, which is fine. You know, these things happen. I can see it's already rubbing off some of the paint. Oh no! This is the fun of doing these kind of mod projects, is you have to come up with solutions to these problems. Whether or not they're clever, I mean, I'll leave that down to you. I'm going for a very cheap and cheerful approach here. Now, I doubt this adhesive is particularly strong, so I may have to do something about that. But there we are. I've basically just created a little rubber spacer on that top section, which I'm hoping will dampen the gap between the top and the bottom, stopping the grate from moving up and down. There we go. I have put 4 sponge spacers on those middle sections there. So let's see if that's any better at all. Oh, I think that's done it, you know. There's like a tiny little bit, and I think that's more because the magnets aren't close enough to the edge. But you know what? I'm pretty happy with that. I'm very, very happy with that indeed. And it will stop the paint from being scuffed up, so that's good. Once the grate is on, it's like really good on one side because it's grabbed the metal, but then you have a gap on the other side and it's like, well, it can't touch it. I suppose what I could do is the cheap and cheerful solution is literally just put another magnetic strip on top of the other one. And in fact, let's see what the tolerance is like on that. So here's one I made earlier. If I put this one on top of the other one and then try to sandwich it, yeah, I can't. It's too tight of a gap. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. It is what it is. Let's get creative, shall we? I have resolved the problem. What I had to do is I did add the additional tabs of magnet tape, but then I used some of that really thin foam that I used for the tops and bottoms of each of the sections here to sandwich the gaps between it. And this was just enough to create what I refer to as a hybrid magnetic friction mount. Basically, the magnets are effectively useless. At this point, the magnets are in fact spacers to the sponge. Now, once you get it in the right angle, in fact, I think it works better in one orientation, so I'm just going to flip this round, put it in one end, and then just kind of pinch the other side in, and then give it a wiggle. And then what you will find is that it mounts perfectly fine. I mean, there is a bit of a gap in here, but I'm going to try and just flex the grate a little bit around the middle so that it becomes a bit more concaved as opposed to convexed, because I think it just has a natural shape where it is concaved and it wants to bend outwards. So I'll just flex it the other way a little bit, and then hopefully that will resolve the issue. But you know what? As far as like having it as a friction mount is concerned, I'm happy with that anyway. So, you know, it is what it is. I've said that a lot throughout this video, actually. It looks pretty sick. Very happy with it. What we just need to do now is get the fan filters themselves, because at the end of the day, this was actually meant to be about creating custom filters, as well as adding the grate, of course. But now I'm going to go ahead and cut some magnet strips, which I'm going to use with a knife and ruler to cut the magnet strips in half so they're not quite as thick. And then we'll cut out some of this mesh and then put that so that it goes in each of the square sections.
Just a quick pointer on the clip that you're watching now. It's very important that when you're putting the strips of magnetic tape onto your filter, if you've got a bit of a bend to the filter mesh itself, then make sure that the bend itself is pointing upwards, so it's creating a dome on the surface as you're mounting the tape. The tape itself is far more rigid than the fabric, so this will actually force it to adhere to a new sort of shape. Because of its rigid structure, it actually tends to want to become more flat. If you did it the other way, however, it doesn't tend to conform in the same sort of way. It doesn't have as much leverage to be able to flatten out the filter surface. So just a bit of a tip, if you want your filter to become flatter, given the fact that it's starting as a bended shape, then make sure that the dome part is pointing upwards and then put the strips on top of it.
So, these filters, I can tell you now, is probably one of the closest to factory production products that I've ever made. They are stupidly on the money when it comes to their fitment. Okay, the only sort I would say downside to having this sort of 3 grate connected with nuts and bolts in the middle is the fact that the nuts themselves do get in the way, or the bolts actually, sorry. So what I actually might do is once again get my best friend Mr. Dremel and just cut the ends of those off so it's a bit more accessible. But as you just saw there, it wasn't exactly very difficult for me to put the fan filters on, and for the rest of them it's just a case of, I tend to put the bolt side in first and then it just kind of drops in on the other side just fine. One of these filters is in fact perfect in terms of its size, but all of them, once they're in there, they are completely flush with the top and bottom, which is exactly what I was looking for. What I also did, just sort of outside of camera, is I don't even think you're going to be able to tell at this point, but I've purposely bent the kind of joints between each of the grates so that the whole filter frame now is concaved inwards as opposed to convexed, depending on your perspective. Of course, it could be convex for you. If you want to look at it from the inside of the case, that's fine too. But the way that it all fits in now is I tend to put one side of it in, give it a bend, and then it just slides into the front of the case. Give it a little wiggle, and there we have it. We have a nice filtered case. The fact that I can see the magnets here, I'm going to say it again because I've only said it a million times in this video. It is what it is, right? There is still a tiny bit of a gap in the top and the bottom. I'm actually just going to flip this around to see if that makes any difference at all. So once again, the method of getting this in is pop it into one side, bend it inwards, and then you can just wiggle it into place there. I would actually say that probably looks a little bit better from my perspective, but it's not perfect. But this, in fact, what I've come to learn with building this project here, this case, is that don't seek perfection because you end up going down a bit of a rabbit hole. Actually, how easy this was to do. Granted, I do have some tools at my disposal in order to do this, but you don't actually need them. The fact that I got these 3, well, imagine a scenario, right, where maybe you didn't get this case and you didn't intend to put in the drive cages into the case, but you just wanted to have a separate one of these like on your desktop, and you wanted to have one of these mesh filters. Well, now you've seen the process of how to kind of go about making some of these filters, and it is actually very, very straightforward. I would highly recommend. The thing that saved the day was having a good knife with a nice fresh blade on it, and actually having a metal ruler made all the difference, because the magnets would snap to the ruler and they would basically just be held in place, and it made it much easier for me to cut through them on a consistent basis, at least anyway. Yeah, really handy to have that. The fact that I also had a Dremel as well, it's irrelevant unless you're making a project of this kind of scale. So as much as it pains me to say, this is again unfortunately not the finale of this project. It's a little bit bigger than I had anticipated. But just flipping around to the back quickly, this is where I think a lot of attention is needed. So I do need to come up with a power supply mount, because right now this is free to move about in the case. There we go. I'm also needing to sort this out. This is my Unraid boot drive, but I need to swap that out with something a bit more slimline that isn't poking out right at the end of the case. So there we have it. That is how you create a custom fan filter for whatever project that you want. And the end result is totally worth it, because you can make the fan filter fit exactly the kind of dimensions that you're going for. The reason why that's important is because if you have one of those cases that has, let's say, a curvature in there that a off-the-shelf fan filter won't accommodate for, so why not make it yourself? As for how you go about making the magnetic side of that is a little bit more tricky, so I'm going to let you discover that for yourself. As for the mesh itself, I would highly recommend going on, I mean, if you can get it on eBay, this is where I sourced my roll of fan filter material. This was really cheap to buy in bulk, and I would urge you to do so. It gives you some flexibility to use it for other projects in your house as well, and yeah, it speaks volumes when you have extra lying around that you could use for other projects, not just the one that you're working on, but others to come as well. So that's it. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.